I was talking to somebody the other day, Marybeth, and they said the phrase, "That's my Waterloo." Have you ever heard anyone say that phrase before? That's my Waterloo.
I have not. I've only heard of the beverage. Is that a seltzer water? I think.
Oh,
I've
wait,
actually never.
is it? I think you're right. I think it is a beverage too. Well, it's a really antiquated saying, and I've maybe heard it once ever prior to this week when somebody said it to me, and I was like, "Oh wow, I I completely forgot that that was even a thing." Not that we think about the Battle of Waterloo, but they were referring to, like, the phrase means, that's my Waterloo, like that's my challenge, because that's the battle that Napoleon was finally defeated at, right? So it's like, oh, that's my Waterloo, that's my challenge, that's the hill mountain battle that I have to fight, climb, whatever. But
Yeah.
I just thought, oh man, that's a really great way of putting a challenge that you have or a problem. And I thought, I wonder if other people have heard that phrase often enough, but I don't know, might be time to bring it back, especially for this episode of the
Yeah.
Solutioneers, where we talk about
Yeah.
problem solving.
So
But
that's
isn't
my
that wild?
Waterloo. That's a great phrase. Yeah. For that's my battle. That's my challenge. And it's not. That's my seltzer water. I'm gonna remember that. That's good to know.
No, yeah, but I forgot that that's a seltzer water brand too, which then makes me wonder, hmm, I wonder where the name came from for the seltzer. Um,
A
but
difficult time, maybe getting it to market. I don't know.
yeah, or they're like, "Oh, Waterloo," or maybe they're from who knows. But discussion investigation for another time. I'm just so excited to have you back for another podcast, a new series where we're talking about actually other people's Waterloos or challenges or battles that they're fighting, but in a positive way, right? Because we always want to come up with a solution to something. And I think one of the biggest ones that we've both been talking about recently is that creative block. We all talk about writer's block. I mean, I think writer's block is more often referenced, but I don't know if we really talk about creative block a lot. So what are your thoughts on that?
Creative block. Yeah, it's very similar to writer's block. I mean, in a sense, writer's block is creativity too. But I feel like if I'm in a really bad moment where I have no idea what I'm going to do, I take a deep breath, I take a step back, and I look at other people's work and I try to get inspired. And I don't try to like solve the problem right away, but rather just let it come to me through looking at other work. So whether it's looking at competitors of a client, or other marketing agencies, what they're up to, other clients, and going back and referencing things that have worked really well in the past that may have been forgotten, because I think a lot of times we find something and it works really well and then we forget about it, and sometimes the answer is really simple, and it's right in front of us, and we've done it before. So I think a good thing for writer's block too, or creative block, would be to, I guess, not reinvent the wheel, and going back to things that have worked really well. Um, so yeah, researching, getting inspired, using past work as inspiration, and of course taking courses. Right, I love learning, doing Adobe courses or HubSpot are really good tools too for sort of, reopening that creative space that we need to use every day.
Well, I love what you said, and it makes me think that we really need to make sure there's time for creative thought, not just creative action, but giving ourselves time to think and ideate and process before the finished product. If that aligns a little bit, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I think sometimes just trying to get something done for the sake of getting it done will actually take away time, because it'll have to be redone, and maybe it won't be done as well. But if you just take some time to really let that creativity and that inspiration and that research sit, um, that idea can come and then you can get a lot of good content from it. So, yeah, not rushing through anything and giving yourself that time to be inspired, I think is really important. Yeah.
And you mentioned training too. I think that's really great because, you can receive other points of view, or maybe it's going back to the basics, like you were saying, or maybe it's not the basics, but going back to what we already know works because maybe you don't have to fix something. Maybe it's not broken. Maybe it's simply reminding ourselves what we have available to us, or realigning with that foundation. If what I'm hearing you say sounds along those same lines. And that also makes me think that inspiration really does come from anywhere. So, have you been surprised by where you've gotten some inspiration or reminders or solutions to that creative problem for yourself?
Yeah, I think I like to, this is going to sound so cheesy, but I like to find inspiration everywhere. So even if I'm not in work mode, even if I'm not in creativity mode, let's say it's the weekend and I'm watching a movie. I'm always thinking about symbolism, but sometimes in that movie something will relate to a client or an idea and then it'll just spark. Maybe it's just the way something looks, or maybe it's like the design layout, or some sort of symbolism. But it's again that time that you have to allow to come to you. You don't know when it's going to come to you always, but um, yeah, always surprised, always finding inspiration. And one of the places that I love to look, we do online graphics and design, but I love magazines. I love feeling it. I love the design. I love seeing what other people are doing and how they're using text for layout. Like I'm constantly getting inspired by like magazines because essentially these pages, like, doesn't this look like an IG like
It
profile?
does.
Like, doesn't that look graphic? Like, what are they doing? And just, I guess, feeling this and seeing it close up and not being pixelated on a screen is inspirational to me. And just I don't know. Art is everywhere. You don't really have to look that hard, I think.
I think that's a great reminder, and a great reminder too that sometimes the answer, the solution is beyond the actual problem. And at FMO, one of our values is thinking like there is no box, right? We don't want to box ourselves in. We're not even thinking outside the box. We're thinking like there is no box. So sky's the limit. Imagination can go way beyond any sort of guidelines or stricture, right? And so that sort of aligns with that idea of the solution can be anywhere, whether it's something physical, tangible that you can feel and experience. Maybe it's something visual outside of the digital realm, like in nature, or even I would think music too, something that we hear orally, and finding inspiration from that as well. So, what's an example of maybe something recent where you had to step beyond even the outline of that box and expand for that solution?
Sure. Well, I just want to quick note that I love, like, since working for FMO, it's always been standard that there is no box. And whatever ideas that you have to bring to the table, they're always welcome because we're always trying to see what works best, what fits best, what's best for everyone, what's most creative, what's the most efficient. It's a great way to think. And it's cool that we're not like, this is the way we always do it. And I love how things are ever changing and evolving and always getting better. But as far as thinking outside the box recently, a lot of times we get a new client, and I'm working on their strategy before we get them really launched into their year. And they're so busy running their businesses, sometimes we don't always get the content that we need, and we don't get the videos or the pictures. But I still have to create something for them that speaks to them, or I should say for them. So I love making graphics, using specific text that speaks to who they are. Even if I don't have a picture of them, but they're a lawyer, I can use, let's say, I don't know, a, a serif font, like a Times New Roman, to convey like authority and strength. Um, Navy blue for trust and loyalty. So even though we don't have all of that, those graphics that we need, the pictures and the videos, or maybe some of the questions, we can still convey who they are as a brand, as we're waiting for those in different ways through graphics and design. So that's one way that I have recently thought outside the box.
I love that because it shows you're not waiting, you're ideating. As we like to say, don't wait, ideate.
Right.
And you're not letting a limit or lack of resources or, in this case, maybe marketing assets that we would really want as soon as possible when developing that strategy. You're actually creating what you can and using your imagination and what works too for that client, their industry, the messaging, that brand reputation that we're building for them overall to create something. And I think that's just so wonderful because you're not letting your limitation dictate what you can do. You're going way beyond that. And it's almost like, to me, Mary Beth, it's almost like there is no problem. It's maybe a challenge, but it's a fun, creative challenge. And we don't have to look at it as, oh, even finding a solution. It's simply, here's a fun, creative task that we get to work on. And I think you do a great job of that. And even cooler when we do get that customized content or those photos, because then you can go even further beyond that creative resourcefulness that you have to create something unique and special for them, which is just awesome. Um, Speaking of collaboration, too, when we're in a creative environment and working with a team that's really agile and everybody has a responsibility and everybody has a great important part to play in developing that strategy and or executing on it too, how do you foster that sense of creative collaboration without stepping on toes or offending or uh, making sure that people have their voice heard and contributed to? How do you go about fostering and engaging that?
Sure. Well, one of my favorite sayings is like collaboration is key. And I think that the best ideas come from collaboration. But again, it's hard to not step on toes. Like I'm always concerned about that. And while I love having, Zoom meetings with groups of people and bouncing off ideas, I do think that sometimes that's where you can step on some people's toes without realizing it. So one of my favorite ways actually to collaborate is through Slack or through texting, just because you can hear one thought before coming up with the next thought of someone else and kind of see what comes out of all of these thoughts together as it grows sort of organically rather than like in the same moment. So it's more of like a timeline of collaboration. We start here, and then we move along rather than everyone's thoughts all at the same time. So that's that's how I like to collaborate with ideas and coming up with new solutions personally.
That makes me think of one of my favorite phrases to use, which is you can't create in chaos. And sometimes it
Mhm.
could be chaotic if everybody does try and pile on ideas all at the same time. So that makes me think there really is a structure and there can be a process to the creative approach where you can guide people through that path and help add on and find the value and test and try new things, but you're not trying to do everything all at once and you're keeping it focused at the same time too. Would you say that's accurate?
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it. I yeah, for sure. I
When
also wanted to say I love
Yeah.
we have this office party chat, and I think it's just so cool to shout out each other's wins and to give each other that, that sense of validation and just that, everyone's doing a great job. And I think just having that support from the team also opens up um, wanting to collaborate and wanting to share new
Mhm.
ideas. It's just sort of all works together with the support and then the collaboration and then the creativity and just fostering like a really positive environment. I think helps with the collaboration too.
I agree. You're right, because it needs to be the basis for the culture. Otherwise, people are going to feel afraid or maybe hesitant to speak up because they are afraid to step on toes. We don't want anyone afraid to do that. And we certainly want to make sure that everybody's included and everybody's thought gets that respect and gets that chance to contribute to whatever that project is. So I think you're right. And being able to shout out those wins and encourage everybody also is a great feeling for the whole team because you can see that everybody's idea is included. And if one idea can work and help move the needle, then my idea can also work and help move the needle forward or find a way to improve on every level. Maybe it's not even a client project, but maybe it's something internal. So I love that. And I'm glad you pointed that out too. Um, when it comes to the creative collab, is there an example of a project where you felt like the team was really in sync and had the most kind of exceptional outcome because of that environment and because of that empowerment to be involved and to have that investment as an individual but also as a team together?
Well, I think generally, when we think of the film agendas that we come up with as a team, it's really like the foundation to a year of content, and so they're really important. And it's really important to grasp that emotional storytelling from clients. And I find that as we get into several film shoots, the more we get to know the client. So I love ideating ideas for the film agendas, getting to know the client a little bit, researching their industry and how their personality fits in with it. But then I love when we have other team members like videographers who go out to the shoots or team leads or supporting account managers or people that have had conversations with clients and know them on a deeper level when they start to add their ideas, again bouncing ideas off one another, one person starting an idea, maybe the other getting inspired by it. But having that relationship with clients, everyone's relationship is a little bit different, some closer, some I'm a little bit more in the background. But I think when we sort of add all of our big ideas down to our personalized touches for those agendas, we get some really beautiful content. And that's one of my favorite ways that we collaborate here at FMO.
I love that, and it's so important. There's so much work that you all put into those film agendas. I wish we could almost show everybody just the bulk of thought and strategy that goes into one singular film agenda. And maybe there's a way. I mean, you just communicating your passion for it to Mary Beth comes through. I'm curious, is there a film agenda or some ideas that you would like clients to know about or think about? Because going back to that collaborative question, the film agenda is collaborative too, right? So we always bring our ideas to the table. We want to make sure that we're helping guide that creative and coach clients on what we know as experts will work, but also have fun and experiment with it too, right? And at the same time, we want to make sure that clients can share their ideas with us. So, how do you allow for or open up space for a client to share their thoughts and align with what we're planning out for that film day?
Sure, I would say be your authentic self. I think you know, the topic is obviously important, but I think even more so, just being authentic, being yourself, not trying to be someone that you're not, is really going to capture just anyone's attention. Because I think being like authenticity builds trust. And when you have trust, that really helps with your brand and getting customers and clients. So, looking at the film agenda, the ideas that we've come up with, and just adjusting them to something that is comfortable for you. So if you're not comfortable saying, "Yo, check out how I sold this house in 5 days," you can say something like, "It's unbelievable. Look how I sold this house in 5 days." So lingo stuff, we like to experiment with that on the film agendas. But if it's not authentic to something, if it's not like authentic to your vocabulary, change it up. Do whatever you need to do to sound like you, because that's definitely the most important aspect.
I love it for sure. If you were to talk to yourself 5, 10 years ago and give yourself advice as a creative, as a strategist, what do you wish you knew then? Or what advice would you give yourself then that you would want to share? Because I ask that because I think that there are probably people, hopefully people, who are listening at that earlier stage in their career where they want to make content or they are making content, and we can maybe share something that's helpful for them, that you would like your past self to know.
Sure. I would say trust yourself. Even if you're having a little bit of self or lacking self confidence, trust yourself and be kind to yourself and learn. And I think the more you do that cycle, you can gain confidence. And even if you are confident, still learn. Learn from mistakes, from your growth. Every day is a school day. So, yeah.
I love it. Every day's a school day. I think that's a great point and a great point to wrap on too, because with this podcast, we're talking a lot about how do you come up with solutions? How do you find new ways that are maybe they're innovative, maybe they're a little bit edgier, maybe they're the basics that we have to remind ourselves of, which you reminded us of, Mary Beth. And I think because we are solutioneers in that sense, you have to keep learning in order to remind yourself or to find new avenues, new approaches. And I think you're a great example of someone who's dedicated to improving and finding new creative ways of helping clients grow, helping the team grow in whatever you do. So thank you so much for joining me on this podcast today. It's always a pleasure. I don't
Thank
know
you.
what next series we might ideate, but I know you'll be on the next series too. So always
Awesome.
happy to continue the conversation.
Thanks for having me.